Next time, you may not be so lucky, Comandante.
In 1957, a masked hero in black galloped onto American television screens and changed everything. Children carved his signature into their school desks. Studios spent fortunes trying to match his quality. And just when Zorro became the biggest show on television, Disney pulled the plug. Not because of ratings, not because of money, but because of a legal battle so intense it destroyed one of TV's greatest successes at its absolute peak. Today, we're uncovering 15 iconic facts about the original Zorro series that reveal why this wasn't just another Western, it was a revolution. Number 1. The Z craze. Let's start with the most visible impact Zorro had on American culture, the Z itself. Every episode, Guy Williams would slash that iconic mark into walls, clothing, or furniture with 3 lightning-fast strokes of his sword. It looked effortless. It looked cool, and American schoolchildren absolutely lost their minds. By late 1958, schools across the country were reporting the same bizarre phenomenon. Students were carving Z's into their wooden desks using pencils, pens, and anything else they could find. Disney never publicly apologized, but the Z craze became legendary. It proved that Zorro wasn't just a TV show. It was a cultural obsession that kids physically carved into American classrooms. And wait until you hear how much Disney spent to make that obsession possible. Number 2. The most expensive Western. In the 1950s, most TV Westerns were cheap, assembly line productions. Studios cranked them out quickly with minimal budgets, reusing sets and costumes to save money. But Walt Disney had different plans for Zorro. Each episode cost between $75,000 and $80,000 to produce, an absolutely staggering sum for television at the time. To put that in perspective, most Westerns cost around $20,000 to $30,000 per episode. Disney was spending nearly triple the industry standard, and it showed in every frame. The costumes were custom-tailored. The cinematography rivaled Hollywood films. The lighting, the camera angles, the attention to detail, it all screamed movie quality in an era when television was considered the cheap alternative to cinema. Critics immediately noticed Zorro didn't look like a TV show. It looked like a feature film that somehow aired every week. Number 3. Building a real pueblo. Walt Disney hated fake-looking sets. He despised the flimsy cardboard backdrops that most TV Westerns used. So, instead of cutting corners, he spent over $100,000 building a permanent Pueblo La Reina de Los Angeles on the Disney Studio backlot. This wasn't a set. This was a functioning town. It included a full-scale presidio, a Spanish colonial church, realistic dirt streets, and authentic-looking buildings that could be filmed from any angle. The attention to architectural detail was obsessive. Disney hired historians to ensure the Pueblo matched early 1800s California. The investment paid off for decades. That same Pueblo appeared in countless Disney productions long after Zorro ended, from movies to other television series. It became one of the most used Western sets in Hollywood history, and it all started because Walt Disney refused to accept anything less than perfection for his masked hero. Number 4. Real fencing skills. Hollywood loves using stunt doubles. It's safer, faster, and easier to film. But Guy Williams didn't need one, at least not for swordplay. Before being cast as Zorro, Williams was already a trained and capable fencer. He understood footwork, blade work, and the rhythm of a duel. This meant that during every single fencing scene, the camera could stay locked on his face. No quick cuts to hide a stunt double. No awkward angles to disguise someone else's hands. It was Guy Williams in full costume, executing every parry, thrust, and slash himself. For television audiences in 1957, this was electrifying. They could see Zorro's eyes during the fight. They could watch his expressions shift from playful confidence to focused intensity. The fights felt real because they were real, at least in terms of the swordplay. Williams did use a stunt double for dangerous physical stunts like high falls or horse jumps, but when it came to fencing, that was 100% him. And the man who taught him those moves was a legend. Number 5. The Fencing Master. The choreography in Zorro wasn't designed by just anyone. Disney hired Fred Cavins, the greatest fencing master in Hollywood history. Cavins had trained Douglas Fairbanks for the silent film The Mark of Zorro in 1920. He'd worked with Errol Flynn on The Adventures of Robin Hood in 1938. He was the man who made movie swordplay look authentic. And he brought that same expertise to the Disney series. Cavins insisted on historical accuracy. In the early 1800s, Spanish and Californio swordplay emphasized the point of the blade, thrusts and precise strikes rather than wild, slashing. He choreographed every duel to reflect this, making Zorro's fighting style elegant, efficient, and deadly. It wasn't just flashy action, it was technically correct action. Number 6. 4 horses played Tornado. Zorro's faithful horse, Tornado, was as iconic as the mask itself. But here's the secret. Tornado wasn't one horse. He was 4. The primary horse used for close-ups and rearing shots was a black quarter horse named Diamond Decorator. He was trained specifically for controlled dramatic movements, rearing on command, standing perfectly still, and responding to subtle cues. He was the actor horse. But for high-speed galloping scenes, dangerous stunts, and fight choreography, 3 other horses were used. Each had a different specialty. One excelled at full-speed runs. Another was trained for combat scenes where the horse had to stay calm near loud noises and sudden movements. The third handled risky stunts that required a horse with nerves of steel. From the audience's perspective, it all looked seamless. Tornado was one loyal, intelligent companion. Behind the scenes, it was a carefully coordinated team of 4 horses, each playing their part in the legend of Zorro. And speaking of seamless illusions, let's talk about Zorro's secret hideout. Number 7. The Matte Shot Cave. One of the most memorable visuals in the series was Zorro's hidden cave entrance behind the fireplace in the hacienda. The camera would pull back to reveal a massive, shadowy cavern stretching deep into the hillside. It looked enormous. It looked real. It was a painting. The effect was created using a matte shot, a technique where artists paint a scene on glass, then position that glass in front of the camera lens. The painted portion fills in the background while the real set occupies the foreground. When done correctly, the two blend perfectly, making a small studio set look like a sprawling underground lair. Disney's effects team were masters of this technique. The matte paintings were so convincing that most viewers never suspected they were looking at artwork. They believed Zorro had a genuine cave system beneath his home, when in reality, the cave was a 10 by 10 studio corner with a painted illusion stretched across the background. Number 8. Filmed in B&W, designed for color. In 1957, almost no one had a color television. ABC aired Zorro in black and white because that's what audiences could watch, but Walt Disney was already thinking decades ahead. He insisted on filming the series using high-quality color film stock, even though it would air in black and white. The costumes, sets, and props were all designed with color contrast in mind, deep blacks, bright reds, rich browns, so that when color TV eventually became standard, Zorro would still look incredible. His foresight paid off spectacularly. In the 1990s, when the series was remastered and colorized, it looked shockingly natural. The colors weren't faded or washed out like most archival black and white footage. They were vibrant and intentional because Disney had planned for this moment 40 years earlier. Number 9. The Musician Mute. Gene Sheldon played Bernardo, Don Diego's faithful mute servant. Bernardo couldn't speak, but he communicated volumes through expressions, gestures, and perfectly timed physical comedy. Audiences adored him. Here's the twist. Gene Sheldon wasn't mute. He was a trained radio musician and professional pantomime artist. Before Zorro, he'd worked in vaudeville and radio, performing comedy sketches and musical acts where precise timing and physicality were everything. His background in mime is exactly what made Bernardo so effective. Sheldon understood how to communicate emotion without words. He knew how to hold a beat, how to land a visual joke, and how to make silence speak louder than dialogue. His comedic expressions weren't accidental. They were the result of decades of professional training. Number 10. Sergeant Garcia's operatic voice. Henry Calvin's Sergeant Garcia was the bumbling, lovable antagonist, a Spanish soldier who was too clumsy and good-hearted to ever truly catch Zorro. He was funny, endearing, and surprisingly talented. Because here's what most viewers didn't know. Henry Calvin was a trained baritone opera singer. Before acting, Calvin had studied classical singing and performed in stage productions. Disney's showrunners discovered this during casting and immediately wrote it into the series. Several episodes feature Garcia singing in full voice, sometimes drunkenly, sometimes romantically, sometimes just for the joy of it. These moments added unexpected depth to what could have been a one-note comic relief character. Garcia wasn't just a fool. He was a man with dreams, emotions, and hidden talents. Calvin's operatic voice gave him dignity, and audiences responded with genuine affection. Number 11. Guy Williams beat 23 other actors. Finding the perfect Zorro was not easy. Disney held exhaustive auditions, testing 24 actors for the lead role. Each had to demonstrate swordplay, horse riding, charm as Don Diego, and intensity as Zorro. Britt Lomond, who would eventually be cast as the villain Captain Monasterio, auditioned for Zorro. He was talented, charismatic, and skilled with a blade, but he didn't have what Walt Disney was looking for. Disney wanted someone who could embody two completely different personas. Don Diego had to radiate aristocratic elegance, almost foppish disinterest in violence. Zorro had to explode with dashing heroism and physical confidence. Most actors could do one or the other. Guy Williams could do both. Number 12. The height requirement. Guy Williams stood 6'3". So did Henry Calvin. This wasn't an accident. Disney wanted Zorro to look tall and imposing, a larger-than-life hero who commanded the screen, but he also needed Sergeant Garcia to be physically credible as a threat. If Garcia were short or small, the audience wouldn't believe he could ever challenge Zorro, even if Garcia was clumsy. By casting two tall, broad-shouldered actors, Disney created a visual balance. Zorro looked heroic, but Garcia looked powerful enough to be dangerous if he ever got his act together. The comedy came from Garcia's incompetence, not his size. He was a legitimate physical presence who just happened to be perpetually one step behind. This attention to visual storytelling extended to the guest stars Disney brought in, some of whom would become legends. Number 13. Cesar Romero's appearance. Zorro featured impressive guest stars and none more iconic than Cesar Romero. Romero played Esteban de la Cruz, Don Diego's uncle, bringing gravitas and star power to the series. This was years before Romero would become famous as the Joker in the 1960s Batman series, but he was already a respected Hollywood actor with decades of film experience. His appearance elevated Zorro's prestige. This wasn't just a kids' show, it was attracting serious talent. Romero's performance added weight to the family dynamics and reinforced the idea that Zorro was something special. But Romero wasn't the only actor with surprising connections to the series. Number 14. A young Joker. Here's a fun piece of irony. George J. Lewis, who played Don Alejandro de la Vega, Don Diego's father, had actually played a villain in earlier Zorro serials. In the 1940s, Lewis portrayed the Black Whip, a masked antagonist in low-budget Zorro serials. By the time Disney's Zorro aired in 1957, Lewis had aged into the perfect paternal figure. He went from playing the villain chasing Zorro to playing the hero's father. It's a beautiful example of Hollywood's cyclical nature. Actors evolve, roles shift, and yesterday's villain becomes today's wise patriarch. Lewis brought warmth and authority to Don Alejandro, and his history with the Zorro mythos added an extra layer of authenticity to the role. But despite all this success, the high ratings, the cultural impact, the star power, Zorro ended abruptly. And the reason why is one of the most frustrating stories in television history. Number 15. A premature cancellation. Zorro wasn't canceled because it failed. It was canceled because it succeeded too much. By the end of its second season, the show was one of the most watched programs on television. Kids loved it. Adults loved it. Critics praised it. Disney was making a fortune from merchandise and international syndication. But behind the scenes, a bitter legal war was brewing. Disney and ABC were locked in a massive dispute over ownership rights to Disney's television library. ABC wanted more control over reruns and distribution. Disney refused. The network threatened to cancel all Disney programming if Walt didn't comply. Walt Disney didn't comply. Rather than surrender creative control, Disney pulled Zorro off the air at the peak of its popularity. The show ended in 1959, not with a finale, but with a quiet cancellation that shocked fans and left storylines unresolved. Zorro rode off into the sunset, not because the story was over, but because Disney refused to compromise his vision. Zorro wasn't just a TV show, it was a blueprint for quality television that prioritized craft over profit. From real fencing to painted caves, Disney built something that still captivates us decades later. If you love these facts, hit subscribe for more forgotten Hollywood stories. Now, go carve a Z into... Actually, don't do that. Just watch another video.